My girlfriend laughed. Your biggest problem is thinking hard work actually changes anything. I calmly agreed and left forever. Nearly a year later, she read my success story while waiting alone at her dentist's reception desk. Melissa laughed before she answered me. Not a mean laugh. Worse than that. A tired one. Like she'd been holding it in for months and my question had finally given her permission to let it out. You okay? I'd asked. That's it. That's what started it. She'd been quiet for 2 days, answering everything in one word, and I finally asked if she was okay. She was sitting on the edge of our bed, still in her work clothes, scrolling through her phone with the kind of focus people use when they don't want to look at you. She didn't look up right away. You really don't see it, do you? She said. See what? She set the phone down on her knee. Screen still lit. Your biggest problem, she said, is thinking hard work actually changes anything. I remember the room got very quiet after that. Not silent. I could hear the refrigerator running in the kitchen, the neighbor's dog 2 floors down, but quiet in the way a room gets when something in it has just become permanent. I work 60 hours a week, I said. I know you do. She wasn't cruel about it. That was the part that stuck. She said it like she felt sorry for me. And in 5 years you'll still be driving that truck to somebody's backyard, and I'll still be the one explaining to my mother why we're not further along. I didn't argue. The truth is less flattering than the story I told people afterward, that I walked away with dignity, like I'd made some kind of choice in that moment. I didn't. I just stopped talking. I've always done that. When something matters too much, I go quiet instead of loud. Okay, I said. Okay. She almost looked disappointed, like she'd been ready for a fight, and I hadn't given her one. Yeah. Okay. I picked my keys up off the dresser. Not dramatically. I wasn't leaving forever in that exact second, or at least I didn't think I was. I just needed to not be in that room. I drove to the Quick Trip on Sawmill and sat in the parking lot for 40 minutes without buying anything. That was in October. What Melissa didn't know, what nobody could have known that night, including me, was that almost a year later, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon with nothing marking it as different from any other, she'd be sitting behind a reception desk in a dental office off Bethel Road, phone against her ear, and someone would forward her a business feature with my name in the headline. She wouldn't laugh that time. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. But that's later. First, you should know how we got there, because none of it happened the way either of us expected. We met at a wedding neither of us wanted to be at. I was there for Marcus, my cousin, who'd somehow talked his way into being a groomsman for a guy he'd met twice. Melissa was there for the bride, a co-worker from the marketing firm where she managed accounts. We ended up at the same round table near the back, the one reserved for people the seating chart had run out of ideas for. She made fun of the chicken. I made fun of the DJ. By the time the bouquet got thrown, we'd exchanged numbers, and by December we were spending most nights at her apartment in Grandview, the one with the window unit that only cooled half the living room. It was easy in a way relationships aren't supposed to be easy, not this early. She liked that I didn't perform for her. I liked that she noticed things. She'd catch me rubbing my shoulder after a long day and just start kneading it without asking, already halfway into a conversation about something else. I worked landscaping and hardscaping crews, mostly patios and retaining walls, for a company owned by a guy named Steve who paid on time and nothing more. Melissa worked accounts at a mid-size firm downtown, the kind of job with a dress code and a parking garage validation sticker. She made almost twice what I did. It never seemed to bother her. Not at first. She used to come watch me work sometimes, sit on a stack of pavers with an iced coffee, and pretend she wasn't bored. Once, in April, we finished a paver patio for an older couple in Bexley, and the wife came out with lemonade for the whole crew. Melissa took a picture of me covered in dust holding a glass of lemonade like it was a trophy, and she posted it with a caption that just said "proud of this guy." I still have that picture saved somewhere. I didn't delete it. She canceled dinner with my mom twice. Both times with real reasons, a client emergency, a migraine, but never with an offer to reschedule. I noticed that part more than the cancellations themselves. I canceled a weekend trip to her cousin's engagement party because Steve needed the crew for a rush job, a retaining wall that had to go in before a storm hit. I told her 2 days out. She said it was fine. She said it 3 separate times, which is how I knew it wasn't. You could have said no to Steve, she said. The Friday night, I should have been packing for a drive to Cincinnati instead of loading mulch into a trailer. He's paying me time and a half. It's my cousin's engagement party, Daniel. I know whose party it is. She stood in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed, not yelling, just very still. Do you ever think about what our life actually looks like? Like 5 years from now? I think about it. And I didn't have a rehearsed answer, because until that exact second I hadn't realized I was supposed to have one. I think we're okay, I said. I think we figure it out as we go. That's not a plan. That's just hoping. The trailer needed to be hitched by 6 the next morning, so I let it go, the way I let most things go that summer. We ordered pad thai and watched half a movie and went to bed without touching each other, both of us pretending to already be asleep before we actually were. My mother noticed something before I said a word to her about it. She called me on a Tuesday, out of nowhere, and asked if everything was all right with Melissa. Why were you asking? Because you haven't brought her to dinner in a month, and when I ask about her you changed the subject like I asked about your taxes. Things are just busy. That single sound my mother makes when she doesn't believe you and has decided not to fight about it yet. Busy people still make time for who matters, Daniel. You know that. I told her things were fine. I told myself the same thing, more than once, usually around 11 at night, while Melissa slept with her back to me and her phone face down on the nightstand, which she'd started doing sometime in July and never explained. I didn't ask her about it. That was the pattern by then. She'd drop something small and sharp, and I'd absorb it and keep moving, like a guy taking hits in a fight he'd already decided not to throw punches in. I kept telling myself it was a rough patch. Every couple has rough patches. I didn't know yet that October was coming, and that when it did, she wouldn't be dropping something small. She'd be done pretending the small things were the whole problem. My mother finally got me to dinner alone, no Melissa, on a Sunday in early September. Pot roast, the kind she only makes when she wants you sitting at the table longer than you planned. You've lost weight, she said, which is what she says instead of you look tired. I'm fine, Ma. I didn't say you weren't fine. I said you lost weight. She set a second helping on my plate without asking. How's Melissa? Good. Busy with work. You keep saying busy. She sat down across from me, wiped her hands on the towel she always kept over her shoulder. Busy isn't a feeling, Daniel. It's what people say when they don't want to say the real thing. I pushed the roast around my plate for a second. She thinks I should go back to school. Get into something with more, I don't know, more of a ceiling on it. And what do you think? I think I like what I do. Then that's your answer. She said it simply, like it wasn't complicated, even though we both knew it was. But I'll tell you something, and you can be mad at me for it. A person who loves you wants you to grow. A person who's ashamed of you wants you to become someone else. Those aren't the same thing, even though they can sound alike from far away. She's not ashamed of me. My mother didn't argue. She just looked at me for a second too long, the way she used to when I was a kid, claiming I hadn't done something we both knew I'd done. Your father worked concrete for 31 years, she said. People used to ask me if I ever wished he'd gone into something else. Office job. Something with air conditioning. She almost smiled. I never once wished that. I wished people respected concrete more. Not that he stopped pouring it. That's different. Is it? I didn't answer, because I honestly wasn't sure anymore, and my mother has never needed me to answer a question out loud for her to know she'd made her point. She reached over and put another spoonful of roast on my plate, and we let the subject die there, the way our family lets most things die, not resolved, just no longer said out loud. Driving home that night, I thought about calling Melissa, telling her about dinner, about my mom's face when she asked how things were. I didn't call. I told myself it was because it was late. It wasn't because it was late. It was a Wednesday, and the fight started over a coffee mug. Melissa had a mug she liked, a chipped one from a trip to Asheville the year before we met, and she left it in the sink for 4 days straight, instead of the dishwasher 3 feet away. I finally washed it myself and set it in the drying rack, and when she got home she picked it up and looked at it like I'd broken something. You didn't have to do that, she said. It was just sitting there. I was going to get to it. It's a mug, Melissa. That's not the point. She set it down harder than she needed to. You always do this. You wait until you're annoyed, and then you fix it yourself instead of just saying something. I wasn't annoyed. I washed a mug. You washed a mug like you were making a statement. I remember standing there thinking, even then, that we weren't fighting about a mug at all. I just didn't know yet what we were actually fighting about, and neither, I think, did she. What's actually going on? I said. She crossed her arms, looked out the kitchen window instead of at me. I don't know. I'm tired. Of what? Of feeling like I'm the only one thinking about where any of this is going. She said it fast, like it had been sitting loaded for a while. You wash a mug and think that's effort. I'm talking about 5 years from now, Daniel. 10 years. And you're talking about a mug. I'm not thinking about it. I just don't obsess over it the way you do. Maybe someone should. The kitchen went quiet except for the hum of the fridge, the same sound from the night in October that hadn't happened yet, though I didn't know that at the time. She left the kitchen without finishing the conversation, and I didn't follow her. I honestly didn't know what I would have said if I had. We didn't talk about it again that night, or the next morning. We just moved around each other carefully, the way you move around furniture in the dark when you already know exactly where it is, and you're trying not to hit it anyway. The night it actually happened started completely ordinary, which is probably why I remember every detail of it. I'd worked a 10-hour day, a drainage job that ran long because we hit a root system nobody had accounted for. I came home smelling like dirt and diesel, and Melissa was sitting on the couch with her laptop, an email open, her face doing that thing it did when she was composing something she didn't want to send. Rough day? I asked. Rough couple weeks, she said, without looking up. I got a shower, ate leftover pad thai standing at the counter, and by the time I came into the bedroom, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in her lap, screen still lit like she'd been in the middle of something and stopped. That's when I asked if she was okay. I've already told you what happened next. The laugh. The line about hard work. The way the room went still in a way that had nothing to do with sound. What I didn't tell you was what happened in the 2 or 3 seconds right before she said it. The way she looked at me first, not with anger, but with something closer to exhaustion, like she'd rehearsed the sentence in her head so many times that saying it out loud almost felt like relief. I've been trying to figure out how to say this for a while, she said, after the silence had gone on long enough that I think she felt she owed me more. And I don't think there's a nice way to say it anymore. So don't say it nice, I said. Just say it. I don't think you're going to change. And I don't think I can keep waiting to see if you do. Change into what? Into someone who wants more. She said it gently, which somehow made it worse. I'm not saying you're a bad person, Daniel. I'm saying I don't think we want the same life. And I think I've known that for a while, and I've been scared to say it because you're good to me. You just don't want what I want. I sat down on the end of the bed, not next to her, just at the edge of it, elbows on my knees. Okay, I said. Okay. Yeah. I stood back up, because staying seated suddenly felt unbearable. Okay. I picked my keys up off the dresser. I didn't move out that night, even though it would make a better story if I had. Walking into the dark with a bag already packed, like I'd seen it coming. I hadn't. I drove to the Quick Trip on Sawmill, sat in the parking lot until almost midnight, and then drove back and slept on the couch without either of us saying another word. The actual leaving took 11 days. 11 days of both of us being unnaturally polite, passing each other in the kitchen like co-workers who'd had a disagreement in a meeting and hadn't resolved it yet. She started coming home later. I started staying later on job sites than the work actually required. On the 11th day, I rented a storage unit off Route 33 and started loading my truck on a Saturday morning while she was at her sister's baby shower. I don't know if that was cowardice or mercy. Maybe both. I packed slow. Clothes first, then the stuff that was harder. A framed photo from a hike we did in Hocking Hills. A hoodie of hers I'd been wearing so often it had stopped being hers. A coffee mug of my own that had somehow ended up in her cabinet instead of mine. I found the picture she'd taken of me in April, dust on my face, lemonade in my hand, proud of this guy typed underneath it. It was printed and stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like Ohio. I stood there for a while looking at it before I decided to leave it exactly where it was. It felt wrong to take it, like it belonged to a version of us that hadn't ended yet. She came home while I was carrying the last box down to the truck. She stood in the doorway of the building, keys still in her hand, watching me for a second before she said anything. You're doing this now? Didn't seem like there was a good time. She looked at the box in my arms, then passed me at the truck, already half full. Something in her face shifted, just slightly, like she was seeing the actual size of what had happened for the first time instead of the idea of it. Daniel, I'm not mad, I said, and meant it mostly. I just don't think there's anything else to say that we haven't already said. She nodded, slow, arms crossed against the October air. For what it's worth, she said, I don't think you're going to fail. I just don't think it's the kind of life I want to be part of while you figure it out. I didn't have an answer for that. I still don't. Not really. Not one I could have said out loud in that parking lot with a box of my own clothes cutting into my forearms. Take care of yourself, Melissa. You too. I drove away with the radio off, the whole city going by in that flat gray light Columbus gets in late October, and I remember thinking, very clearly, that I had absolutely no idea what came next. I just knew I couldn't keep being the version of myself that made her look at me the way she had that night. I stayed at my mother's for 6 weeks. Slept in my old room, The one she'd never fully converted into anything else, twin bed and all, like some part of her always knew I might end up back there. She didn't ask questions the first few nights. Just left food out, made sure the porch light was on when I got back from the storage unit or wherever I'd been driving with no real destination. On the fourth night, she finally sat down across from me at the kitchen table. "You don't have to tell me anything," she said. "But you also don't have to pretend everything's fine at my table. I know the difference." "We broke up," I said. "I know." She didn't act surprised, which told me she'd known before I said it. "You gonna be all right?" "I don't know." That's an honest answer. I'll take it. Work became the only place I could stand to be. Steve had me on back-to-back jobs through October, and I said yes to all of them. Every weekend crew he needed, every early morning. It wasn't ambition. It was just easier than being still. I stopped checking my phone the way I used to. Melissa didn't call, and I told myself I didn't expect her to, which was mostly true. What I actually kept doing, without meaning to, was noticing the absence of things. The passenger seat in my truck that used to have her sunglasses in it. The playlist on my phone I couldn't bring myself to delete or listen to. One night in early November, I sat in my truck outside a job site long after the crew had left, engine off, just sitting there in the cold. I wasn't crying, even though it would sound better if I had been. I was just sitting there, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hours I'd worked. I thought about what she'd said. "Your biggest problem is thinking hard work actually changes anything." I didn't know yet if she was wrong. That's the part nobody tells you about being on the receiving end of something like that. You don't get to just decide she was wrong and feel better. You have to actually find out. Marcus called me on a Sunday in November, which was unusual because Marcus mostly texted and only called when something was either broken or important. "You still doing patios for Steve?" he asked, no greeting, which was also very Marcus. "Yeah. I got a guy retiring end of the year. Commercial hardscape stuff. Retaining walls, drainage systems, bigger jobs than Steve's doing. He's looking to sell the equipment and half his client list cheap, cause his kids don't want it, and he just wants to be done." Marcus paused. "I can't take it on myself, my knees are shot. But I thought of you." "I don't have that kind of money, Marcus." "Didn't say you needed all of it up front. Says he'll finance some of it if the right guy shows interest." "I told him you were the right guy." Another pause. "You interested or not?" Nobody warns you that starting a business in December in Ohio means starting a business during the exact months nobody wants hardscaping done. January nearly broke me. Not dramatically. There was no single moment where everything collapsed. It was slower than that, and worse for being slow. 2 clients from Frank's list didn't return calls. The skid steer needed a part that cost more than I'd budgeted for the whole month. I paid myself last, after the loan payment and Priya's hours. I'd hired her part-time in December to help with quotes and scheduling because I was drowning in paperwork I didn't understand, and some weeks that meant I paid myself nothing at all. I ate a lot of rice and beans that winter. Not as a story I tell for sympathy. It's just what a person eats when a person is being careful. There was one night in February where I sat at my kitchen table. I had my own apartment by then, a 1-bedroom off Henderson Road. Nothing special. With the business account open on my laptop, watching the number get smaller than I was comfortable with. And I thought, clearly, and without drama, maybe she was right. I didn't call anyone that night. I didn't spiral exactly. I just sat there a long time, the way I used to sit in the Quick Trip parking lot. Except this time there was no laugh to replay, just a number on a screen that didn't care what I'd meant to prove. I called my mother the next morning instead. Told her things were tight. "Tight isn't the same as failing," she said. "Your father had a winter in '09 where we didn't know if we'd make rent. You don't remember it, cause you were 7. We made it. You'll make it too, if you don't quit on yourself before spring gets here." "How'd you know it'd be all right?" "I didn't," she said. "I just decided to keep going anyway. That's usually all it is, Daniel. Nobody knows. You just keep going and find out." By March, one of Frank's old clients, a property management company for commercial buildings, called back, wanting quotes on drainage work they'd been putting off for 2 years. It wasn't a fortune. It was enough to breathe. Priya had been doing bookkeeping for 2 other small contractors before she started helping me part-time, and within a month, she'd rearranged half my systems without asking permission first. "You're quoting jobs too low," she told me in March, spinning her laptop around so I could see a spreadsheet I hadn't known existed. "You're basically paying people to let you dig up their yard. I don't want to lose jobs over price." "You're not losing jobs. You're losing money on the jobs you keep." She tapped the screen. "Frank undercharged for 11 years because he didn't think what he did was worth more. You're doing the same thing. Stop it." Nobody had talked to me like that in months. It wasn't cruel. Priya never was, exactly. She just didn't waste time being gentle about things that didn't need gentleness. I found myself looking forward to the days she worked in the office more than I probably should have admitted out loud. "Can I ask you something?" she said one afternoon in April, both of us going through invoices at the folding table that passed for my office furniture. "Why do you always act surprised when a job goes well? Like you're waiting for it to fall apart?" I didn't answer right away. Guess I got used to somebody expecting it to. Somebody, or a specific somebody. I didn't say Melissa's name. Priya didn't push for it. She just nodded slightly, like she already had her answer, and went back to the invoices. "Just so you know," she said. A minute later, not looking up, "The work's good. The clients like you. You're not waiting for anything to fall apart. It's already not falling apart. Might want to start acting like you believe that." I didn't say much back, but I thought about it for the rest of the day, and longer than that, if I'm honest. The strange experience of someone stating a fact about me like it was obvious, instead of something I had to prove first. By May, we'd landed 3 new commercial contracts, and I hired our first full-time employee, a quiet guy named Rob who used to work for Frank and missed the work more than he'd expected to when he left it. I still thought about Melissa sometimes. Less than I had in December, more than I probably wanted to admit to anyone, including myself. Mostly I thought about her on ordinary days, not sad ones, driving past a restaurant we used to go to, hearing a song that used to come on in her car. I wondered, sometimes, if she ever thought about me the same way. She did. I just didn't know that yet. Melissa started seeing Connor in January, for months after I moved out. She'd tell people later it happened slowly, but the truth was closer to immediately. She met him through her coworker at a holiday party, and within a few weeks, he was picking her up in a car that cost more than most people's yearly salary, taking her to restaurants where the menu didn't list prices. For a while, it felt like proof. That was the word she used in her head, even if she never said it out loud to anyone. Proof that she'd been right to want more. Proof that the life she'd been describing to me in our kitchen actually existed somewhere, and she'd finally found the person who could give it to her. Connor was good to her, mostly. That's the part she'd never admit to her sister, because it complicated the story she needed to tell herself. He just wasn't around. Regional sales meant he was in Denver, Charlotte, Nashville, more weeks than he was in Columbus, and the version of the relationship she got was mostly texts and video calls and one very nice dinner every few weeks that felt more like a business update than a date. By April, she'd started noticing the pattern. He'd cancel plans the way I used to, except with better excuses, a client dinner instead of a rush job, a delayed flight instead of a trailer that needed hitching. The irony wasn't lost on her, though she didn't let herself sit with it long enough to call it that. "You seem distracted lately," her friend Kayla said over lunch in May, the kind of comment that's really a question. "I'm fine. Just busy." Melissa heard herself say it, and felt something twist slightly, some small recognition she pushed down before it could finish forming. In June, Connor told her over dinner, a good restaurant, the kind she used to imagine, that his company was considering him for a permanent move to Denver, and that he thought it'd be smart if they figured out where they stood before he accepted. Where we stood turned out to mean he wasn't sure the relationship made sense long distance. Not permanently. Not with the way his career was going. He said it kindly. He wasn't cruel about it, which made it harder to be angry, the same way I imagine it had been for me. She didn't cry in front of him. She waited until she got home, sat on the same bed where she'd once told me my hard work didn't change anything, and cried in a way she hadn't let herself do since October. Her firm had layoffs in August. Nothing to do with her performance, just budget cuts that hit her department hardest. And by September, she was between jobs, watching her savings shrink the way mine had that winter, applying to positions that felt like steps backward from where she thought she'd be by 30. She didn't think about me constantly. That would be its own kind of lie. But some nights, driving home from an interview that hadn't gone anywhere, she'd catch herself wondering what I was doing, whether the business had made it, whether I still thought about that night in October the way she sometimes did. Not with guilt, exactly, but with the uncomfortable feeling of not being entirely sure anymore that she'd been right. By late summer, the business had stopped feeling like something I might lose and started feeling like something that was actually mine. We landed a contract with a growing property management company that oversaw 11 buildings across Columbus, drainage and hardscape work that would keep us busy through most of the fall. It wasn't the kind of number that changes a life overnight. It was the kind of number that means you stop doing math in your head every time you buy groceries. Priya had gone full-time by then. Rob brought his cousin on for the bigger jobs. I hired a fourth guy in September, a kid named Tyler who reminded me of myself 4 years earlier, showing up early, staying late, not saying much. You know what's different about you now? Priya asked me one afternoon, both of us going over a bid for a job in Dublin, a suburb north of the city. What? You don't apologize for the price anymore. She didn't look up from the spreadsheet. Back in March you used to almost flinch handing someone a quote. Now you just say the number. I thought about that for a second. She was right, though I hadn't noticed it happening. Somewhere between the hard winter and that afternoon, I'd stopped waiting for someone to tell me the work wasn't worth what I was charging for it. Frank stopped by the shop in October, nearly a year since he'd sold me the business, just to see how things were going. He walked around slow, looking at the new equipment, the second trailer, Tyler running the skid steer we'd upgraded in July. You did all right, he said, which from Frank was closer to a speech than anything else I'd ever heard him say. Wouldn't have happened without you giving me the shot. I gave you the equipment. He shook his head slightly. You did the rest. Don't let anybody tell you different, including yourself. I drove home that night the long way, past the restaurant Melissa and I used to go to on Fifth Avenue. And for the first time in almost a year, it didn't put a weight in my chest to look at it. It was just a restaurant. I noticed that, and I noticed myself noticing it. And something in that small realization felt more like progress than the contract had. A local business reporter named Angela Ruiz reached out in November, doing a piece for the Columbus Dispatch's small business section. Something about tradespeople starting companies during a labor shortage. Local guys filling a gap bigger companies weren't covering. I almost said no. Priya talked me into it. You've built something people should know about, she said. Stop being weird about it. Angela came by the shop on a Tuesday, asked questions for almost 2 hours, wanted to know about Frank, about the winter I almost didn't make it through, about why I'd started in the first place. I didn't mention Melissa. I did mention, without really planning to, that the hardest year of my life had also ended up being the year I stopped needing anyone's permission to believe I was doing something worthwhile. The piece ran in December, a modest feature with a photo of me and the crew in front of the shop, Tyler holding a shovel like it was a prop, which it wasn't. It did well enough locally that a regional business publication picked it up 2 weeks later, expanded it slightly, ran it under a headline that made Priya laugh out loud when she read it. Something about grit outperforming credentials, more dramatic than the story itself, but not wrong, either. It wasn't viral. It wasn't the kind of thing that changes a person's life by itself. But it got shared around, the way local stories do, co-workers sending it to co-workers, old classmates commenting on it, my mother printing a physical copy and putting it on the refrigerator, right next to the photo Frank had insisted on taking the day I signed the paperwork, the one where I looked like I hadn't slept in a week and was trying not to show it. I didn't think about Melissa seeing it. I didn't think about her at all when it ran, if I'm being honest. I was too busy watching Tyler try to explain to his girlfriend why he was famous now, according to him, for holding a shovel in a magazine. I had no way of knowing that on a slow Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after it ran, a woman waiting for her turn at a front desk in a dental office off Bethel Road would open her phone between patients and see my name in a headline she didn't expect to see. Melissa had been working the front desk at Bethel Family Dental for 2 months. It wasn't the job she'd pictured for herself at 29. Nothing about the last year had been the job or the life she'd pictured for herself, but it paid enough to cover rent on the smaller apartment she'd moved into after Connor left for Denver alone, and the office manager was kind to her, and most days that was enough. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the slow stretch between the lunch rush and the after-work patients, when Qley texted her a link with no explanation, just 3 words. Isn't this your ex? Melissa almost didn't open it. She almost set the phone face down on the desk the way she used to at night, back when she didn't want to look at things too closely. But she opened it anyway, thumb hovering for a second before she scrolled. The photo took her a moment to place. A man in work clothes, dust on his jeans, standing in front of a building with a small crew around him, all of them looking like they belonged exactly where they were standing. It took her another moment to recognize him as the same man who used to sit across from her at a kitchen table, absorbing things she said without ever raising his voice back. She read the article twice, not because she didn't believe it, because she was looking, without meaning to, for some detail that would let her feel like she'd been right about him all along. She didn't find one. Just a story about a hard winter, a business built slowly, a guy who credited an old mechanic and a co-worker and his mother, and never once mentioned her, which somehow said more than if he had. She thought about the lemonade. The picture on his fridge she used to imagine was still there. She thought about the sentence she'd said to him in October, the one she'd rehearsed for weeks before she finally let it out, the one she'd told herself for months afterward had been honest, necessary, the kind of hard truth a person says because they care enough to say it. Sitting there now, in scrubs that weren't hers, behind a desk that wasn't the life she'd promised herself, she wasn't sure anymore which one of them the sentence had actually been about. The phone in front of her buzzed. A patient at the counter needed to reschedule. Of course, Melissa said, sliding the appointment book toward her, phone already face down beside the keyboard. What day works better for you? She didn't text Kayla back that afternoon. She didn't screenshot the article, didn't save it, didn't scroll back to look at it again on her lunch break, though she thought about it more than once. She just went back to work, the way people do, the way I had, the way most people eventually learn to, not because the ache disappears, but because eventually there's a patient at the counter, or a job that needs quoting, or a Tuesday that doesn't care what either of you used to believe about each other. I never found out she'd seen it. Not for certain, anyway. Somebody mentioned once, secondhand, that Melissa had asked about me, quietly, the way people ask about someone they used to know when they think nobody's paying attention. I didn't reach out. There wasn't anything left to prove to her, and I'd stopped needing her to be the one who noticed I'd changed. That part had already happened, quietly, over a year of hard winters and honest work, whether she was watching or not. Some nights I still think about that sentence. Your biggest problem is thinking hard work actually changes anything. She wasn't entirely wrong. Hard work didn't change everything. It didn't win her back, didn't erase the year it took to stop replaying that night in my head, didn't make the winter of unpaid invoices feel any warmer while I was living through it. It just turned out to be enough, eventually, to build something real. That's not the ending I would have written a year ago.